Let's get cooking with Care Team Plus, where flavor meets health. I'm Chef Karla, and today we're gonna make some comfort food reimagined. So I've put a healthy twist on some of our favorite classic comfort foods. As we're heading into fall and winter, we need these comfort foods lined up because here it comes. It's just the perfect time of year to get cozy and eat some good food. So I put a healthy twist on some of the classics. We're going to do a Sloppy Joe. That's going to run us about $2 per serving. We're also going to do baked sweet potato fries that are running about 70 cents per serving. And then last but definitely not least, we're gonna finish with a sweet treat per usual. We're doing brownies that are going to run us about 90 cents per serving. Let's get started. I'm gonna do these baked sweet potatoes to get started. I have 4 sweet potatoes here. I've got 2 options for you. You can keep the skin on if you'd like. I'm actually going to go ahead and peel them. I go back and forth between it. I like having the skin on because there is a little bit more nutritional value where you're getting some fiber, a little bit of added nutrients. I also, on the other hand, sometimes like to remove the skin because it makes it a little bit more crispy. So I figure let's just add some variety, and I'm gonna go ahead and peel them. But you can keep the skin on if you like, just give them a good scrub and then skip the peeling. It makes it a lot easier if you skip the peeling, right? It's magic, right? All right, now that we have these all peeled, what I'm going to do is go ahead and just cut them into a French fry style. And all that we're looking for here is that traditional kind of look on a French fry, and then we want them to be all pretty consistent, so that way they cook at about the same rate. If you cook a lot, if you cut the pieces, some pieces much smaller or skinnier, they'll cook a lot faster and end up burning. So we just want them to be unified. The advantage to cooking your sweet potatoes at home, you can use much less oil and you can use a healthier oil. So it'll just make it much healthier for you overall. Less calories, no inflammatory oils. So we're going to use, I'm actually using olive oil today. I didn't have any avocado oil. So you could use either one of those. A coconut oil is really great as well. It gives you like a little light coconut flavor. And then I've actually recently started to love cooking with beef tallow, a grass-fed beef tallow. It crisps up the sweet potatoes so nicely that it does have that like a crispy, the entire French fry is not as crispy as it would be if it was fried, but what was touching the pan gets a really nice sizzle and a really nice crisp. So that's a nice little trick if that's what you're looking for. So now that I have them all chopped up, they're about all the same size. I'm going to add a tablespoon of olive oil or whatever cooking oil you would like. I would recommend staying away from, don't use the canola oil or the vegetable oil. Those are going to be more man-made processed oils, and they're just not the healthiest for you. So we'll go ahead and add a healthier oil. Then I'm adding some salt and pepper. We're keeping it simple. Garlic powder or onion powder, those are fun ones to add too if you'd like to add some variety. Then I have my sheet tray. I went ahead and lined it with parchment paper. It just makes cleanup so much easier. So I'll go ahead and toss these sweet potatoes and just make sure that the seasoning and the oil has all been evenly distributed. And then we'll pop those out on the pan. And then the next trick on this, the last trick if you will, I'm just gonna spread them all out on the pan evenly. So if I leave the sweet potatoes kind of in a tighter pile where they're really on top of each other, the natural water content in these sweet potatoes will end up coming out under the heat, so it'll create steam. And then it will end up more steaming the sweet potatoes and actually giving them a nice roast, which is what results in a really nice crispy end product. So make sure you spread them out, give them some space. Make sure they're not on top of each other, about like that. And we're going to pop them in the oven. I'm doing 425 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes. Just keep your eye on them as you're cooking. And just, you can kind of halfway through, you can turn them and scoop them around and mix them up so that they're cooking evenly. It's just a nice way to make sure that they do cook nice and evenly and all of them get nice and crispy. But 20 to 25 minutes should do the trick. Let's pop them in the oven. Our next recipe, we're going to do these awesome fudge brownies. They're so good. They are a staple in my go-to dessert recipes. And the biggest reason why is because they're delicious. and they are so easy to make. That'll do it, right? Do I need to say more? So I love this recipe because everything goes into this food processor. We blend it until it's smooth. We pop it in the oven, and boom, we have perfect, warm, fresh, fudgy brownies. I love it. So when you look at this recipe, and even as you watch me do it, you're going to think I am like having a moment where my brain has just given up on me, but I promise you, the ingredients are correct. And when I say that, I mean the first ingredient we're gonna do, we've got black beans. These are canned black beans. I rinsed and I drained them. It's 1 can. We're gonna pop that in. That's a good base for our recipe. And what it does, the thing about the black beans and the beans in this recipe, it adds a good bit of fiber, there's a good bit of protein, and it adds the moisture, like that perfect texture, to support the brownie. So these are flourless, gluten-free brownies. And I promise you, you cannot taste the black beans. In the batter, if you were like, I like to eat the batter too. You can taste it in the batter. Full honesty, right? Honesty is the best policy. So anyway, once you bake them, they're fantastic. I pinky promise you. It sounds crazy. Anyway, let's cook. So next we're going to go ahead and add, I've got cocoa powder here. We're just adding all of our ingredients straight into our food processor. Then I'm going to use melted coconut oil. Pop that in. And you could substitute melted butter instead of the coconut oil if you'd like. I then have some, so in the beginning of the recipe, you'll see it says to use 1/4 cup of water with espresso, instant espresso. And so you'll put those two together. I went ahead and I actually just hit the easy button, if you will. I had some leftover coffee from this morning, and that's what I'm going to use. So I'm using 1/4 cup of pre-brewed coffee. So just make sure it's cool, or at least the heat, the edge of the heat has been taken off of it. So either one, whichever is easiest for you. If you have time and you have instant espresso, use it. And if you have some leftover coffee, use that. Then I have some maple syrup, so I will sweeten it up a little bit. It's just 1/4 cup. Then I have some baking soda. So that's just gonna give us that little bit of science, if you will, to get a really good texture in product here. A little bit of salt. And you guys know, when you're baking especially, salt is just kind of a supporting character to that main character, chocolate. So it's not going to taste salty. We're not adding enough salt to do that, but we're just adding it to make sure we brighten the flavor of that chocolate. And that coffee or the espresso does the same thing, where they're just the supporting characters to really lift up the chocolate flavor. All right, then we're going to go ahead and add 1 egg. We're going to do some peanut butter or almond butter, whatever you have. I just recommend opting for a natural nut butter, whatever option you go for. And when you're go natural, just make sure the only ingredients that you really should have are going to be the peanuts and maybe a little bit of sugar and maybe a little bit of salt. So it should be really simple. There should not be, there's in processed peanut butter and almond butter, you're going to find a partially hydrogenated oil, which is really, again, as we talked about when we were making our baked sweet potatoes, they're just not the healthiest oils. They're more man-made oils. Our body can't recognize them. And so they create just a little bit of havoc throughout our body, and especially if they're oils that we're consuming on a regular basis, the troubles and the havoc that it does create, they really compound and add up over time, causing bigger issues. So little by little, if you can kind of avoid those seed oils and those man-made oils, you're going to little by little get even healthier and healthier, which is always the goal. As you know, we always want to just get better. I'm then going to add a little bit of vanilla extract. In baking, it's super rare to have recipes that you just throw everything in the food processor and blend it. And I just love it. The simplicity, it's so good. All right, last, here's like the real kicker. We've got some chocolate chips here, 1 cup. I'm using dark chocolate chips, so it's just gonna add a little more oomph into the recipe, but milk chocolate is also really great. We're just gonna pop them in. Then I'll go ahead and give it a blend. We're gonna blend it until it's completely smooth. I want to make sure that the chocolate chips, the beans, everything gets nice and smooth. So it will require a good bit of blending time. Be patient, blend it, take the lid off, kind of stir it around, make sure we're getting everything out of the crevices, and then blend it again. And just make sure it's nice and smooth. You know, when you're eating these beautiful brownies, we don't want our family to see that there's black beans in there. It's deceptively delicious. All right, let's give it a blend. All right, this looks great. It's really nice and thick, like a traditional brownie batter, and it's nice and smooth. That's just what we're looking for. So I went ahead, get that out of the way. I went ahead and just greased an 8x8 baking pan, and then I'm going to go ahead and use my spatula and pop it all in here. It smells really, all I'm smelling is like a little bit of chocolate, of course, and then a lot of that peanut butter is coming through. So good. All right, I got every last drop here of this brownie batter. I'm gonna go ahead and smooth it out. And then I'm going to pop it in the oven at 350 degrees. It's going to cook for about 35 to 40 minutes. And so what we wanna do, I always recommend kind of under baking when I'm baking, or at least just setting your timer for a little bit less. So the recipe calls for 35 to 40 minutes. I recommend setting it on the 35-minute mark. And then you can check it, see if it needs a little bit more time, especially when it comes to brownies. A little bit on the gooier side is always a better option, as opposed to overcooking it. So what you're going to look for when it's done is just a little light poke on the top, just with your finger. And it should be able to hold your weight, if you will. So it shouldn't just be so moist that your finger can kind of fall right through it. It should be able to support a little bit of pressure, and you'll be able to feel it kind of spring back a little bit. And the more you do it, the more you get a hang of, little touch for it, if you will. But just mess with it, check it at 35 minutes and see how it's going. 35 to 40 minutes will be the sweet spot. Let's pop it in the oven. Check these baked sweet potato fries out. They are perfect. We've got some great caramelization here, a little crispiness. They look and smell so great. They're going to pair perfectly with our healthy sloppy joes. I'm going to set them aside while we put the rest of our sloppy joes together. Up next, our healthy sloppy joes. Let's go ahead and get started. Sloppy joes, they are a fantastic go-to comfort food. Most kids love them, and we can actually make them a little bit healthier by adding some fresh vegetables and then cooking the sauce with some healthier, higher quality ingredients. We're also going to use a higher quality ground beef. You can also use a ground chicken or a leaner ground turkey, and both of those, all three of those would be a really great substitution for their meat. So to start, I'm going to use 1 red bell pepper, and I'm going to just make it a small dice, because I do want to cut it small enough that it kind of mixes into the ground beef and the sauce, and we don't have huge chunks. We want it to blend in nicely, be a little bit more on the undercover side. So I'll cut these into smaller pieces. All right, we have our bell peppers cut up. Next, we're going to go ahead and do an onion. You can use a yellow onion. That is actually how I wrote the recipe. I went to pull this recipe together, looked in my pantry, and had a red onion. So today's the day we're using red onion, and it's going to be perfect. And you can do the same thing too. There's no need to rush to the grocery store or grab specific things for these recipes. Like if we can substitute them, do it. And so that's what we're doing today. So this is a pretty big red onion. I might end up using maybe 3/4 of it to a half of it. I'll just kind of see what it looks like once I dice it up. But I'm going to cut the top and the bottom off, and then I'll cut it in half. Then I just need to remove this papery portion of the onion. Toss that in the trash. And then I'm going to, again, cut them pretty small because I am mixing it in with the ground beef and that sauce, and I really just want them to kind of go unnoticed in the recipe. So we'll do a nice small dice, and that looks great. I'm actually going to just stick with this half of the onion. It's such a big one, and I think that it would kind of overpower the end result of the recipe, as well as add a lot more volume and chunks to it. So I think half of the onion here is perfect. So again, when we're cooking, there's a lot of flexibility as opposed to when you're baking. When you're baking a dessert, it's usually more of a science. So everything balances out to create that perfect texture at the end. But when it comes to cooking, and as you cook more, if you currently cook a good bit, you know what I'm speaking of, that you can really substitute different items and you can kind of have more of an intuition. So that's what these classes I really like to teach, is just teaching you that intuition and getting a little bit more confident in your kitchen, because it does make cooking so much more enjoyable, less stressful. So that way you don't have to follow the recipe to the T. It's just nice to know kind of like the template and the structure of the recipe, and then kind of wiggle around from there. So that being said, I've got garlic here. The recipe calls for 3 garlic cloves, but guess what? We love garlic in this family, and garlic is really good for you. So I'm actually going to just use, probably it'll end up being about 1/4 of a cup. So the recipe calls for 3 each, or 3 pieces of garlic cloves, which would end up being about like a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half. And I'm going to use, I don't know, I'm gonna say let's use about 3 tablespoons. I won't go the full 1/4 of a cup because I don't want it to be just all garlic. So I do purchase my garlic cloves peeled already, and it makes my life so much more simple. And then I'm more likely to use the garlic cloves. The bulbed garlic, it is the healthiest way to purchase your garlic. It's definitely more affordable to purchase the bulbed garlic, and you're getting better flavor. So there's all green signs there, green flags. But from the simplicity perspective, I do just like to buy it pre-peeled. So whatever works for you, do it. But garlic is so good for you. And I want to encourage you to cook with it, even if you kind of feel like, I don't really have that much time, or I don't feel like it. It adds such great flavor and such great nutrition. It's a great ingredient to keep in there. So I'm just using the mincing method here. So I place my hand on the tip of the knife, and I keep this tile nice and tight so that I can rock my knife through the garlic. And so you'll notice that the tip of my knife is staying on the cutting board the entire time. It's not moving around. And so that just keeps it a little bit safer. So pop that all in the bowl. And now what we're going to do, I'm gonna get this garlic off my hands. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop over to my stove top, and I want to put my heat at about medium heat. I'm going to add a few tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Again, you can substitute different oils here. So a grass-fed beef tallow oil is fantastic. It'll add a really great savory flavor to the end product. Avocado oil is fantastic. I wouldn't recommend coconut oil. Again, that would give you a little coconutty flavor, which doesn't just really pair well with sloppy joes. So olive oil it is for us today. I'm preheating the pan. Then I'm going to add the oil. And now we want the oil to heat up a little bit. So this really helps keep the food from sticking to the pan. So I just have a stainless steel pan. It is not a non-stick pan, so it's not coated. So I do want to make sure that I heat it up properly so that I'm not getting a lot of stickage on the pan. So preheat the pan, then add the oil to the pan. And what that's going to do is just kind of seal the pores of the pan so that when I do add the food, the pan and the food, they know that they're separate. So instead of cooking together and warming up together, they're actually gonna cook separately. So they have heat in separate ways. And that keeps the food from sticking to the pan. And you'll find that that works great when you're doing vegetables or anything protein. Always preheat the pan, add the oil, let the oil kind of gloss over those pores, and then add the food. And when we add the food to the pan, we want to hear that nice little sizzle, that good saute. It's one of the best sounds in the world, one of the many. Bottles of popping like champagne, I love that, and nothing beats that laughter of my child. Those giggles, it's the best. So then maybe a few after that is the sizzle in a pan. So let's go ahead and add our vegetables. That's good stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and let that saute for about 10 minutes or so, giving it a stir every once in a while. I do want the vegetables to get a nice saute to them. So if I stand over the pan stirring and stirring and stirring, it's just going to end up steaming the vegetables, which is just as we talked about with our baked sweet potatoes. We want that steam to actually evaporate really quickly and cause a little bit more caramelization. So I'm going to only stir it maybe every like 3 or 4 minutes. I'll kind of keep my eye on it, but I don't want to just stand over and stir. So give it some time, shuffle it around a little bit, give it a little bit more time, shuffle it around a little bit. 2 or 3 times within that 15-minute time span is probably perfect. All right, our peppers, onions, and garlic have been sauteing for about 15 minutes. Let me show you what we have happening in the pan. I've stirred it every few minutes, so I have some great caramelization here. You can see they've just really kind of, the onions and the peppers, they have just softened down a little bit. There's that caramelization as you can see. So that's really telling me we're good to go here. I'm going to go ahead and transfer these into another bowl. And then I'm going to pop the ground beef into the saute pan and brown the ground beef. So we'll just set these aside for a few moments while we cook our ground beef. Here we go. I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil back to the pan. And then I'm adding 1 pound of ground beef. And like I said, you could do ground turkey or ground chicken instead, whatever you really prefer. And I'm just gonna kind of break it up and brown it and cook it about till it's 95% of the way cooked through, and then we'll go from there. All right, our ground beef is almost cooked all the way through. We're at about 95% of the way cooked through. So I'm going to go ahead and add our peppers and onions and garlic that we went ahead and cooked in advance. And then now we're going to add all of the good stuff that makes this ground beef Sloppy Joe's. So we're going to go ahead and add, we need 1/4 cup of a barbecue sauce. When it comes to barbecue sauce and ketchup, both, I'm going to add ketchup next. When I read the ingredient label, my ideal ketchup or barbecue sauce is looking for something that doesn't have high fructose corn syrup in it, or corn syrup, or any of those unhealthy oils that we've been talking about. So I don't want to see a seed oil, a vegetable oil, or canola oil. I'm looking for like an olive oil or any other oil besides these man-made oils like vegetable or canola oil. So no high fructose corn syrup and only a healthy oil, and then everything else should be pretty okay. It is kind of tricky to find some good ones. I have found that Primal Kitchen is a good brand, especially for ketchup. Barbecue sauce is like hit or miss of finding a good one. So just kind of explore. And again, it's not these, it doesn't have to be an aggressive move. So if you can't find a barbecue sauce that fits those requirements, it's also okay to use something that's not perfect, because it's not what we're eating all day, every day in buckets of it. So it's just little changes that we can make, that we can afford to make. over time that will add up. So don't let it hang heavy on you. All right, let's go ahead and add all the good stuff. So I've got my barbecue sauce, some ketchup. I'm going to add some salt and pepper. Then we need about 1.5 teaspoons of a Worcestershire sauce. So that just adds a little bit of kind of what I would say an umami flavor. It just adds a depth of flavor. Then we're going to do 1.5 teaspoons of a red wine vinegar. And then 1 teaspoon of either a yellow mustard or a Dijon mustard, whatever you have on hand. And last but not least, we need 1/2 cup of water. I'm just going to use our ketchup measuring scoop and just pop that in. Then I want to give it a nice stir, and then I'm just going to let it sit and simmer for a while until that sauce kind of thickens up a little bit, and everything, all these flavors really marry together. So we'll cook it for about 10-ish more minutes on about a medium heat. Let this marry together and get really happy and delicious. Look at these sloppy joes. They look so good. So I've let it simmer, this filling simmer for about 10 minutes or so. It smells really good and bright and fresh. So I'm gonna go ahead and build this plate here. So I have our baked sweet potato fries here. I have a cute little slider bun. When I wrote the recipe, I intended to use a regular size bun, but I came across these at the bakery and they looked really good. So this is a much smaller portion than what I would normally recommend. So you can have, of course, 2 of these to hit those calories that are mentioned in the recipe, but I'll stack it nice and tall. Can't forget the cheese here. So I had some pepper jack cheese. You can use shredded or pre-sliced, but I have great pepper jack here. Pop that on and then pop that there. And that just looks so good. It's just an awesome comfort food dish that everyone's gonna really like. It's not fancy, but gosh, it's good and it's good for you, and it comes together so simply. I'm going to go ahead and check on our brownies and see how they're cooking. Look at our brownies. They look so, so good. So when I press them, like I mentioned before on how to figure out if they're done or not, they've been cooking for 35 minutes in the oven at 350. And when I give it a little press, it springs right back. And a very gentle press will do. Those smell and look delicious. You guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you love all of our recipes, the comfort recipes that we reimagined and made them a little bit healthier, and I hope your family loves them too. If you enjoyed watching this, can you please share this video with your friends and family? We would love that. That's the best way to show love for our Care Team Plus and myself. And if you haven't already, go ahead and turn on your notifications through Facebook to make sure that you don't miss any of our cooking demonstrations or our nutrition seminars. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have an awesome day.